Morning. Good morning, everybody. All right, everybody's coming in. 1 minute, please. Okay, first, does anybody have any questions? Everybody get their first draft turned in? Today, I'm going to talk about how to get sources into your paper. There are 3 ways. I think I've mentioned this before, but just to go over it again, when you're doing a research paper, about 50% of it is you explaining evidence and telling us what to think of it, and the other half of it is the source material that you're basing it on. So there are 3 ways that you can get sources into your paper. Okay, most of you are probably familiar with quoting something directly from a source. So you take it word for word from a source, right? And you say, this is what this person says about this topic, and this is what it means. That's your part, the explanation of it. Okay. No more than about 10% of your paper should be directly quoted material, because quotes are a spice, not a main ingredient in a research paper. Because how do you decide if you're going to quote something? You're basically cherry picking the best stuff. So if they said it really well, they explained it really well, it's thought-provoking. Usually, if you're reading along through your sources and you think something's really clear or well explained or eloquent, your audience will too. Same thing if you find a startling fact or statistic, and your audience generally will have a similar opinion to it. So be on the lookout. If you're reading something, you're like, wow, that's clear, I understand that. That might be something that you pull out to use as a quote later on. Another reason is because they are an authority on what they're talking about. So someone who has expertise in the field can help back up whatever it is that you're saying or the statements that you're making. Okay. So if it doesn't fit that criteria of being really well said or from an authority, then you're probably going to paraphrase it. Okay. And paraphrasing also needs to be cited. This is where a lot of people get in trouble and accidentally plagiarize, because they will say it comes from a source, but they're not always clear about whether it's their words or the source's words. So when you paraphrase, you put things entirely into your words. So hold on just a second, let me admit somebody. We are going to look at a video that explains about the 3 methods. Summarizing is less frequent. It means you may run across 2 or 3 sources that are saying basically the same thing. So you can kind of summarize or hit the highlights of all of those sources and say, multiple sources say this, and you summarize their positions. Now, how do you know if you should cite it in a paper? Does anybody know? What do you have to cite in paper? Come on, talk to me, guys. Yeah, for that part of the citation. So basically for MLA, a lot of the citations look like this. You'll have that at the end of the sentence, right? Or the other thing we're going to talk about is a signal phrase. And that basically means instead of putting the last name of the author at the end in the parentheses, you're going to put it in your writing. So according to Bill Smith, reporter for Time Magazine. You always want to give us just a little bit of their qualifications, because if you say according to Bill Smith, we're like, who is that? Is that someone we should listen to? Are they legit? So you don't have to give us their whole biography or a resume, but you do have to give us a little bit. Are they a researcher? Are they a reporter? Are they an eyewitness? Are they an expert in their field? So according to Bill Smith, reporter at Time Magazine, some people believe we should reopen the economy. Even if more people will die from coronavirus. Okay. So the signal phrase introduces who's speaking or the organization. A lot of times it's easier than putting the name of a website at the end in parentheses to just say, according to the Centers for Disease Control website, this many people in Florida have coronavirus. You tell I'm obsessed with coronavirus this morning, watching too much news. So let's look at this video. Second. Second, guys. Get it to work.
Doing it right. Let's start off by talking about summarizing. Summarizing takes something and boils it down to its essence. Something larger to something.
Hold on just a sec. All right, I still have to figure out the screen sharing, but if you can go to this web address, if you're on a phone, I apologize, I'll post this, but you'll be able to hear the audio, hopefully. So I'm gonna play it. Let me know if you can't hear the audio.
Smaller. Let's take a look at an example. Here's some text that you may be familiar with. If I was going to summarize this, I would take a look at that text and see what stands out for me. It opens with a really great quote. I can't replace that. I can't do better than, so I'm going to include that quote in my summary. After that, let's look at the first paragraph. What's important in that first paragraph?
Well, there are a couple of things that stand out. First off, I see that I have two sides, the rebels and the evil galactic empire. I see that they're having a civil war and that the rebels have just won their first victory. Those are the important key points there. In the second paragraph, I see, again, the rebels stole some secret plans to the Death Star. That's important and good to know. Lastly, I see that Princess Leia is being pursued, and she has the stolen plans. There's a lot more there, but these are unnecessary details if I'm trying to just come up with a summary. So an acceptable summary might look like this. What makes this acceptable? Well, it starts with some citation information. This is not MLA, APA, or Chicago style, but at the very least it's saying, where is this coming from? The movie Star Wars. After that, my exact quote, my great quote, I used it and I put it in quotation marks to say, this isn't me, I'm borrowing this from the movie. After that, I see a lot of the key points that we saw in that original text. We knew there was a civil war between the rebels and the Galactic Empire. We knew the rebels had stolen the plans to the Death Star and that the Empire was trying to get them back. So you can see I took that larger block of text and tried to really boil it down into its essence. Let's take a look at a not so good example. What makes this unacceptable? It still starts with that citation information, which is good. But then what happens after that? Well, there's that great quote, but you'll notice there are no quotation marks here. So I'm saying, I wrote that. That's my language, those are my words, and I didn't take that from anywhere. That's what you're doing when you don't have quotation marks around other people's words. And what about the rest of my wording? Well, I borrowed things, and I just changed them a little bit. So the original text from the movie was Evil Galactic Empire, and what have I got? Oh, well, I didn't even bother changing that, right? The Evil Galactic Empire. Again, it's not in quotes, and I just used it exactly the way it was. Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans. Well, what did I use? I used rebel spies were able to steal the secret plans. Those are pretty similar. Princess Leia races home aboard her starship. And I put, Princess Leia is speeding home on her starship. They sound the same. They look the same. If your text has the feel of the original, then I'm not summarizing. I'm just taking chunks of it and putting it together. Copying and pasting and changing a few words is not a summary. Let's talk about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is almost like a translation. It's taking something written in a particular style, using particular language, and translating it into what sounds like you, what would come out of your mouth. So for instance, let's say I start with a sentence like this. Well, that sounds scientific. It sounds pretty fancy. I'm going to read this and really get a feel for it, and now I can translate it into what I would say. Are all of the important points still there? Let's take a look. So they said the authors studied the effects. And I said, this study looked at, a little simpler. What did they look at? They looked at sub-zero temperatures. And I say, very cold, right? Doesn't have to be so specific. The mortality. Well, mortality is another way of saying surviving or not surviving, right? Your ability to live or not live. And they went scientific. They went with Rattus norvegicus. Well, I'm just going to make it simple. Rats. So I've got the same basic components. I made them a little more understandable for people who wouldn't be comfortable with the original text. Let's do it again. So here is our original block of text. A little more scientific. Not bad. But still, it's not me. It's not how I would write or speak. So I'm going to take that and translate it into myself. Here's what I would say. Let's take a look again and see if we can find the various bits and pieces. Researchers found. I'm going to go with the study looked at. Researchers found is not nearly as intimidating perhaps as the authors studied the effects, but it's not how I would speak. Equally strong association. Well, I'm going to call that a similarity, right? Things are equally strong, well, then they're similar. And I'm going to say that there was a similarity between these things. They say the pleasurable effects of eating Oreos, and I just say the highs produced by sugary junk food. Cocaine or morphine, I don't need to be that specific. I can just say specific drugs. There's my rats. So I'm still looking at the drugs and the sugary junk food on rats. And specifically about a particular environment where the rats wanted to be. They found that the drugs and the Oreos made them both want to be there. So they wanted to be where those things were. Didn't matter if it was drugs, didn't matter if it was junk food, the rats liked them both. You've got to take the original in its actual intent, and you've got to translate it into something that sounds more like you. Let's see something that's a little easier than those two blocks of text. You might be familiar with this movie. If you recognize that phrase, you know that it's something that gets repeated quite a bit. What if I wanted to paraphrase that phrase? I might say that he introduces himself, he informs his foe of the reason why he is angry, and he then immediately issues a threat to him. The essential parts: his name, why he's angry, and what he's going to do next. There they are, only said in a different way. Let's go back to our Star Wars. I have that first paragraph, and now I have my paraphrase of it. Are the important points still there? Let's see. Yep, there's Civil War, and there is a Civil War. I've mentioned that. They said rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory, and I say rebels are using guerrilla tactics resulting in a recent success. Same basic idea. I did like that phrase, though, the evil galactic empire, so I took it and I put it inside quotes. Remember, if you can't do better than them, use their words, put them in quotes. Second paragraph. Well, the rebel spies managed to steal secret plans. Rebels have just stolen the plans. Though there's a weapon with enough power to destroy an entire planet, and I'm going to just call that a cataclysmic weapon. So I said in a shorter sentence a lot of what they said. I didn't feel that the Death Star, the fact that it was an armored space station, was absolutely essential there. Good enough. That last paragraph, let's take a look at what we've got there. Pursued by the Empire. Well, the Empire is giving chase, sure, to our main character there, Princess Leia, or one of them, and plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. She hopes to use the plans to win the fight against the Empire. I was a little less dramatic. You can see the important points, and a phrase was kept in quotes. How about an unacceptable paraphrase? Well, let's start with that first paragraph again. What have I done here? Well, there are some exact phrases without quotation marks again. They're striking from a hidden base. They're striking from a hidden base. There's my against the evil galactic empire, and there it is again. If their words are great, that's fine, but quotation marks. Let's take a look at the rest of this thing. What's wrong with the rest of it? Or what else is wrong with it? How many very slightly reworded sentences do I have that still sound and feel like the originals? Oh, a lot. Wait until you see. Have won their first victory, had a recent victory. It's close. During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon. During the recent fight, Rebel spies were able to steal the plans to the Empire's supreme weapon. You know, ultimate, supreme, there's not a lot of difference there. The Death Star we see is an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet, and I said that the Death Star is a space station strong enough to vaporize a whole planet. Yeah, close enough. Sounds the same. Custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy sounds a whole lot like because she has the stolen plans that can save the rebels and bring peace to the universe. Just leaving off the ... on the end, not enough. There is, believe it or not, some actual paraphrasing going on in here. Up at the top, I had, it is a period of civil war, and I took that and turned it into the rebels and the Galactic Empire are engaged in a civil war. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship. Princess Leia is being chased by the evil members of the Empire as she heads to her home world. It needs to be more than sounds the same and you just substituted one or two words here and there. Not good enough. So when should you use quotes? Ask yourself, can you say it better? In this movie, there are a couple of really great lines, and I don't think that once upon a time in a faraway place in space can do better than a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. May the force be with you is a beautifully put statement. I hope that the spiritual energy of the universe is on your side. It's a little clunky. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's classic. There is no worse place filled with such terrible people in existence. That is not classic. Think about it. Hear it in your head. Can you do better? Is it a great line? Does it really sum up what you want to say? Could you do it better? If not, use it, put it in quotes. However, use quotes sparingly. Not every sentence is a gem. I'll find the best. Use those. How do you summarize? You always start, no matter what you're doing, by reading the text. Jot down the few key words and ideas. What stands out? Remember, stand back. Take a look at it as a whole. Now put it away. Don't have it sitting there while you're working on it. What's important is what will filter up in your memory. What do you remember? That's what stood out. State that main idea in your own words. Remember, this is supposed to sound like you. Don't put your opinion into the summary. A summary is just a statement of the facts. Don't also put your interpretations. That comes later, okay? If you're just summarizing a source, be it a web page, a book, a movie, be plain about what you're summarizing and then talk about it after. Then go back, check your summary against the original. Make sure you didn't go with any of those exact phrases, and if you did, put them in quotes if they were worth keeping. If you used exact phrases and didn't mean to, get rid of it. Take another stab at it. Maybe you got a little more detailed than you needed to be. Get rid of unnecessary details. What is it that's important to know? Don't be flowery, just go basic. Paraphrasing starts, as I said, the same way. Read your text. But now put it away. Don't look at it, just like when you're summarizing. You don't want it there because it's a temptation to look over at it, and then it will be hard to think your own thoughts, their words, right in your face. State those ideas in your own words, your language. What would you say? How would you say it? Don't change the meaning of the text. And don't change the order. Paraphrasing is not taking 3 paragraphs and moving them around like a shell game, and suddenly now paragraph 3 is paragraph 1, and you feel as though you've paraphrased. No. It's got to be in the basic order it came in originally. Don't change what the person was trying to say. Don't change the order it came in. Check your paraphrase against the original. Again, for phrases, make sure that any exact phrases are in quotation marks. And if it still sounds like the text with only a slightly different word here or there, you need to do more work on it.
Okay. Questions? Guys, good so far? So if I'm saying only about 10% of your paper can be directly quoted, then about the other 40% is probably going to be paraphrased, maybe summarized if you need it, but usually it's paraphrasing. Does anybody know what common knowledge is? You don't have to cite common knowledge from sources. So this covers things like the date something happened, because nobody owns the date we landed on the moon or a historical event. So you can go ahead and you don't have to have a source per se to cite those things. Also, common quotations. So you don't have to find a version of Shakespeare. If you want to quote Shakespeare or Mark Twain, you don't have to have a source for those. Good question, Adeline. So bias depends on, I mean, we're all biased to an extent, right? We're human beings, we can't help that. But it depends on what the paper's asking for. So for example, for this paper, I'm asking you to be informative. So in this case, excuse me, you're not going to express your opinion of the facts so much as you're going to explain or give your opinion of how one side views the information. So for example, if we go back to, let's see, does anybody want to throw out a topic, or you want me to come up with one? Anything on your mind this morning? No one's got anything. We can go back to the coronavirus. So if I'm just explaining what one side thinks people will suffer for the coronavirus, about why we should open up the economy in a few days. So their position is the economy collapsing will cause more people to suffer than the virus. So if I'm just explaining their opinion, I'm just going to explain what their thinking is and not say if I disagree or show any of my opinion toward it. Does that make sense? Because in this paper, I haven't asked for your opinion. So it's going to depend on the assignment. If I ask you what you think, or what your interpretation is, like you will do in the paper after this one, where you take a position and defend it, then bias means usually that you're making an argument without any sort of backing to it. Are you guys following me? So if you've researched your issue well, it's always going to have the level of bias of being who you are as a person, but if you can back it with evidence and we can see how you reached your conclusions, we are willing to listen to your opinion. Are you guys following me? So, for example, okay, good. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree with them. If they say the economy is going to hurt more people, so then I might say this is why they think more people will be hurt. You lose your job, higher rates of depression. So I'm just explaining their thinking. Okay. And since this is an informative paper, I don't say whether I think they're right and wrong. Now, if this is my topic for the research paper, I'm going to say, studies show this, experts say that, and I'm going to cite the evidence that backs up my viewpoint. Does that make sense? And the other side is going to say the suffering is greater if we don't slow the spread of coronavirus. Same thing, I'm going to show all the evidence that the other side has to support their opinion. And I'm going to say, here's what their evidence is for that. Then when I get to the research paper, I'm going to say, I agree that there'll be more suffering if we don't slow the spread. And then I will cite the evidence they use, but then I will explain my interpretation of it. So this will affect more people than the other side's view will. Okay, so it depends on the purpose of your paper. Are you doing an informative paper? Or are you doing a persuasive? Did your instructor ask for your opinion? Now I want to talk about signal phrases. And Robert asked a good question about this earlier. It does get kind of repetitive. A signal phrase is what introduces, like I had up there at the beginning, that you're about to give us some source material. Where that thing where you say, according to, or you say something like,
Yeah.
Dr. Brown argues.
Well, I'm on it right now already. All right.
Somebody have a question? So there's a whole list of phrases that you can vary. They point out, they posit. I mean, any of those verbs that can show the speaker's attitude toward what they're saying. Does that make sense? So you don't want to also just use he says, she says. You can say the CDC website lists the most affected states, right? So they can list something, they can say something, they can point out, they can deny, they can affirm. Okay, so you have all those verbs that are possibilities. And I will post a list as well. So let's do a little practice. Pretend that you're introducing a signal phrase source. Okay. Pick a top something related to your topic that you've read about that you know, and introduce either an expert or a website or a source, and give me a signal phrase that leads into a piece of information that they're going to present, that you're presenting from them. So that's a sample sentence that uses a signal phrase to introduce source information. You can make it up, or if you have your paper there, you can use something from your paper. We're just doing a little practice. If you guys could share them with everybody so they can kind of see the examples. They're looking good. Some examples. So here we have predicts. Here's a study. Okay, Alexis, if you see above there, according to a recent survey, according to a study from this university, then you can cite your stats. That's good, Adeline. Okay, we're about to run out of time. So just remember to use signal phrases that A, identify where your information is coming from in the qualifications, and B, have a verb that sort of can show us the attitude. Are they predicting? Are they affirming? Are they rejecting? Are they pointing out? You can use all of those things as those verbs as a way to introduce and give nuance to what you're adding to your paper. Okay, so work on this. That's good, Julian. Julian's. Work on the signal phrases for your paper as part of getting it ready to turn in for your final draft. Okay. And in this case, you're saying, here's what one side thinks, and here's why they believe it. Here's what the other side thinks, and here's why they believe it.